Hello everyone, it's a great pleasure for me and it feels so good to be here. So we have Jason with us. He's the founder, right?
Right.
Of the Source AV. From my perspective, this is the most amazing audio place in the world. It's the paradise of audio. It's in Torrance, California, nearby Los Angeles. So now, Jason, I'm really feeling very excited about this opportunity to talk with you. How did you end up building this paradise and making so many people happy and joyful?
It's a little bit of a story. I come from the concert industry and building recording studios and live concerts. And I retired. I think it was 93. And my brother wanted to change his career because he wanted to start a family. And he asked me to start a company with him, and somehow we chose audio. And for me, audio and video were very easy things to deal with on a consumer level. And so one day we talked about it, and we ended up deciding to go into the business. I think that was 1998. And the only way I would agree to doing it is if we could start from a teaching platform where we could teach people about audio rather than tell them to buy something in particular, so that they could actually be an educated consumer and make good decisions for themselves.
Wow, so this is the story. And I see here that you have different brands, really high quality products from different areas of the world, like Italy, like Germany. So, what is the criteria for you to choose to represent a particular brand in your amazing showroom?
So, so I'm an electronic engineer, or people refer to as electrical engineer. But so, part of my decision is the build quality, um, uh, the stability of the manufacturer. So, if the company's a strong company, um, we'll look at that company very closely, and we'll look at the build quality. We'll look at the application of the product if it makes sense. Those sorts of things. It's just a number of things. Headphones is a little bit different for us. It was actually the headphone community that came to me and asked me to carry headphones because I hadn't ever considered it. And we were asked so often about headphones that we decided to do some homework, teamed up with some folks from a group called Headfi, where they kind of taught me how to, basically what were the popular brands, what were the good brands. So that's how we got into headphones. But audio itself, 2-channel, and theater, these are all common brands. They're, Denon, Marantz, Macintosh, a number of really good brands that have great reputations and are known for quality product and a span of price ranges that allowed us to work with people on smaller budgets and people on very large budgets. So it's just that's how we make that decision. Sometimes today, in today's market, what we do is we'll oftentimes put things on our YouTube channel and see how people react to that YouTube information. And that's where we're not trying to sell you something from that. We're trying to give you an explanation of what the product capability is, what our understanding of the product is, what we think of the build quality of those products. And if the consumers react to that well, then we'll actually review it in the store and see if it's a product that people really want. Sometimes products don't work out because people don't really care about that kind of technology. But for the most part, we do a little bit of homework and make sure that what we sell can be backed up by the manufacturer in terms of service and warranty care. So the biggest thing is can the manufacturer or will the manufacturer support the consumer and allow us the ability to take care of that customer? There's been a few brands where the customer care is really very poor, but the product might be very popular. If the customer care is bad, it doesn't matter if it's popular to us or not. We just don't carry it.
Yeah, makes sense. So, if you were to choose between solid state and tubes, which one you're going to choose?
Me personally?
Yeah, personally. Let's say you're building your like money. Really doesn't matter. You can spend as much as you want.
So
How your dreams audio system, personal one, is going to look like?
well, I think for every individual, it's their own personal choice. But for me,
Yeah.
you know, I like tubes. Tube product requires a bit more maintenance because tubes, over time, you know, grow old.
The bias and so on. Yeah.
But there's also Macintosh coming out with its new hybrid drives, right? Which is tube front ends, which means that it's the preamp side. So whatever you feed into the Macintosh is first treated by the tubes, and then comes out the speaker end or the back end of the unit in solid state format. So you have the best of both worlds. You have the tube soak, which gives you that nice juicy tube sound, and the speed of solid state. So you get the best of both worlds. So that's the new trend. But there are still wonderful companies like Audio Research and a few brands that are 100% solid state that we support because it's a great product and it sounds wonderful.
Okay, so it's a fantastic opportunity for me to talk with you because I have background of electronics, so I can ask you a little bit more deeper technical questions. So if you were to choose between a transformer-less amp, a tube transformer-less, and one of transformers, which one you're going to prefer?
You know, I think that I don't know that I have a preference. I think that's about how they transition, you know, how they do that math. Because I've heard both that sound really, really good. Transformerless can be pretty exciting. It tends to be, I think, in the marketplace and the product that I've seen and experienced, probably transformerless is maybe better in the headphone market. And so I guess that's my opinion of it.
Okay, so next question. How do you feel about the return of the vinyl? And
Wow.
if you have to compare, let's say, because I'm very passionate about reel to reel, and let's say, I know that this may cause a lot of discussions after people watch the video, and at the same time, what is your perspective, reel to reel compared to vinyl?
Well, I think I'm a fan of analog in general. So a good reel tape can sound amazing, but it can also be heavy on noise. A good piece of vinyl, there's a lot of deterioration in the product, right? Just like tape. So, you know, tape fails over time, and so you lose the surface, the magnetic surface, and you lose that sound. With vinyl, you get wear and tear from the stylus sitting in the groove, and, you know, it's going to wear out.
Yeah.
On the other hand, both can sound very, very good.
Yeah.
And way more detailed than I think than streaming or purely digital product.
Okay, I hear you, and at the same time, unless we're talking about direct cut vinyl, then at least historically, everything first goes through the tape, like through the reel to reel first, and after that, they were making the vinyl, correct?
Right.
Okay, right. So then it makes sense that the source, the initial source is the reel to reel. Technically, it must sound better. Okay, better. My point is that the vinyl is recorded pretty much from the reel to reel. So the concert goes first, for example, to the reel to reel, and after that, from the master tape, they create the vinyl.
Yeah.
So technically, the quality of the reel to reel, I'm talking about the technologies before.
Right.
Technically, the reel to reel must be more accurate, closer to the source compared to the vinyl. You agree with that?
So I think you're right. Direct to disc is a better way, but live recordings are they're not done that way. And you know, it's depending on the era that it was recorded. It could have been cut on a 2-track, a half-track, quarter-inch, half-inch. So when you get into the expanded, tapes, 2-inch and 3-inch tapes, it can get pretty juicy, and you get a lot of the nuance of the live recording. And so there's a lot of attributes in tape, and that is the studio way of doing it back in the day. Now they go straight to digital, but they are always going to start off. I mean, music is analog, right? So the instruments are going to be analog. The microphone setups and the input setups and the mic pre's on the mixing console, those are all analog, and then converted to digital. And that's just, DSD started that way as a storage mechanism, right? Not as an actual way to play things back. And so digital's come a long way. It's getting better, but it is still not as good as tape or vinyl.
Yeah, so mentioning DSD is a great introduction to my next question. If you have to compare, if you were to compare DSD with PCM, like the FLAC standard, which one you're going to choose?
So I think that's a tough question. I think that, again, it's a personal preference. I think that DSD was an accident, but it was a very good accident that you can't really discount it. It's a very good product. It's a great way to store things. It's a great way to master things from a digital perspective. So I don't know. I guess maybe I'm leaning towards DSD.
Okay, DSD. Okay. And my next question. So if you were to choose between a modern, let's say, microphone and one from the 50s and 60s, like let's say AKG valve type microphone, which one you're going to choose?
So coming from that era, starting in the early 70s, I would tell you that microphones like the original Neumanns and the original Telefunkens, some of the original RCA microphones, these are just amazing microphones. Those companies still exist. They don't do quite the same job as the originals, but if you can get a good Telefunken and you can restore it, it's just amazing. If you can get a good original Neumann from way back in the day, really very good. AKG has always been kind of a standard. Sennheiser was a standard. A number of companies had standard microphones, but if you listen to some of the really good recordings from the 60s and maybe even as back as far as the 50s, things like, Frank Sinatra. These were really, really good engineers, and they used those type of microphones, and those recordings are just amazing.
Okay, so what is, let's say, your dream? You already have the setup here, you have the showrooms and everything. What is your direction where you would like to bring the Source AV, let's say, in the next 5 years?
So the direction has always been one direction. I don't think it'll change. It's mostly how do we teach people what they need to know so that they can pick a stereo that makes them happy for a long period of time, or a theater, whatever that, if it's a theater, the idea is to look at the product and the consumer and say, okay, here's your longevity, because that product changes like weekly, right? HDMI changes, all these, going from, 480 to 720 to 1080 to 4K, and now the threat of 8K. Where does it end, and how do you stay in front of it so your product longevity is good if you're trying to stay up with technology? In 2-channel, it's the same thing as it's always been. The difference is that the speaker technology is getting better, the amplifier technology is getting better. The manufacturers are learning how to get their noise floors down better so that the black space is really the black space, and it's just allows that music to open up and breathe. And so our direction is to show people how to look at that and make their determination based on their budget, what suits them. And so that's, I think, going to continue to be our direction. Do I want to become a Best Buy? No. Do I want to become anything in that world of dominance and multi-crazy stores and a boatload of employees, an army of employees. You know, no, it's too hard to to treat people the way I want,
Yeah.
to and be that kind of a store. Uh, so I think the store will always be a boutique in nature, but we have expanded into online sales. I I I like the revenue from it, but there isn't an interface between us and the consumer, other than a chat device or if they call in.
Yeah.
And so that medium is a little bit of a struggle for me because I like for people to be able to answer questions and learn different perspectives and how products can be used and what has the best synergies. Um, but it is what it is. It's the new world, and that's why a lot of young people come into this market. But at the same hand, I see young people buying this, and then 3 weeks later they're buying that, and 4 weeks later they're buying that, and it's just because they didn't get what they wanted in the first place. So I believe the human interface is much better than the online interface, but I can't fight the market.
So let's imagine that you have a magic crystal ball which can envision the future, let's say another 5 years ahead. How do you see the, let's say, I'm not saying the music industry more about the sources and the types of equipment. We see now that there's kind of comeback of the vinyl. Let's say in the next 5 years, do you see comeback of the reel to reel? Because personally, I see more and more websites popping up offering like $500 and up recordings of master tapes and stuff like that. So what your magic crystal ball is saying for the next 5 years?
So I don't think I see long-term tape medium being out there because it's really very expensive, and I think that the amount of content is very limited. On the other hand, I do see that, you know, vinyl has been on a rise for a long time. It's been coming, you know, for several years now. It's been climbing and climbing and climbing. And we even get headphone users that have little headphone amplifiers and headphones that are buying inexpensive turntables with nice phono cartridges on them and getting into vinyl. So I see the trend towards vinyl growing. I don't know what the longevity there is, but there is a benefit to the analog, and so I think that there'll always be some degree of analog. Where I think tape is limited is not the quality of the tape heads or the quality of the tape recordings, but mostly the amount of content, where there's less conflict in the amount of you know, vinyl content. There's a lot more.
So in general, can you agree with me that most of the vinyl records, which now they are doing like reissuing them, the source is actually on reel to reel, perhaps? I'm not sure. That's why I'm
So
asking.
not always. No.
Yeah.
It's, matter of fact, you know, there's a lot of, you know, master discs. There's a lot of small boutique, you know, pressing places where you can go get really good pressings. It kind of depends. I mean, so I'm a friend with a guy named Verdine White from Earth, Wind and Fire, and they are considering taking their older tapes and going into vinyl. I mean, I'm sorry, into tape and vinyl. And so I think that there's a possibility. It's just I don't see a lot of enthusiasm from the artist perspective if they own their own material, if they own their own masters, going to tape. But I see a lot of artists getting excited about going to vinyl. And I think the vinyl quality is getting much better.
Yeah. I'm still going to talk about the reel to reel because this is my passion. And for example, I believe that Lady Gaga, or like maybe a few years ago, she made the choice to record on reel to reel, and I believe that there is a she's really a great singer, jazz singer. She's based somewhere in San Clemente or here in Southern California. Lindsay, not, I cannot recall her name. She made the choice to go with a reel-to-reel recording.
Yeah.
So, at least from what I read on the news, there are some glimpses here and there. And at the same time, I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense.
Well, the question is not whether they record on, a tape. The question is, do they choose to release it in quarter-inch tape format?
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. So oftentimes when they're recording to a 2-inch tape, they're more likely headed towards vinyl. Do I think that vinyl is cool? Yeah. Do I think it has room or a place in the industry? Why not? I mean, it's a good product. And just like vinyl, it's subject to environment, so it could be, you could accidentally lay your record on LP on your cabinet, the sun hits it, and boom, it's warped. A lot of things can happen, in terms of degradable mechanism. But even digital has a degree of degradation over time. You could buy a CD, and if it's not properly treated, it goes yellow, and now the CD sounds like poop. Right?
Yeah.
Or it might have been done off a duplicate CD to CD or digital transfer to digital transfer, and there can be degradation there too. So there's challenges in all of it, and I think that there will always be things like SACD that are trying to get out there again, and I think that there's MQA.
Yeah.
People go, oh my God, MQA. Well, MQA isn't really MQA unless.
Okay, it's somebody's calling you. So yeah, it's the important phone call interrupted you while you started to talk about the MQA, and yeah.
Well, so MQA is interesting in that it, like many things like that, I don't want to call it a gimmick, but if it for it to be done right, it has to be embedded at the studio,
Yeah.
in the original recording.
Yes.
If it's subsequent to the original master, it's just a gimmick. It changes things a bit, but it's not. I don't know. For me, it's not really impressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
The MQA I've heard that is impressive is when it's embedded at the
Yes.
recording level.
So I'm really very grateful for you to touch this topic because in, let's say, in the audiophile community,
Right.
like different forums and stuff like that, there are lots of discussions about that, and
Well, I'm sure there's many people that'll argue with me.
yeah, and actually I feel blessed to have you here and to hear from a person with such experience in the industry and from like electronics background, your perspective. I appreciate this a lot. And next thing, how do you feel about the cables? Let's say, you know, there are people who spend like thousands of dollars buying a power cable from point A to point B. What is your perspective? Of course, I agree that the material, the chemistry of it makes a difference, and I'll stop here and I'm going to hear what.
So one thing for sure is that an upgraded power cable can really make a big difference. And mostly in the supply of current, so the power supply, and then subsequently in the output stage. So that's one that really I recommend highly. When you think about it, so in different countries they have a certification of cables, right, for power cables. And what's happened in that market is that, like here in the United States, why would a company pay $40,000 and sometimes several months or years to get a upgraded power cable put in so that they can sell it and meet in the U.S. It's called UL. I think it's Triple C in the Asian markets. I forgot what it's called in Canada and in the European world, but there's all these certifications. that basically say this cable meets the standard of safety. Here in the U.S., where a lot of the high-end products are made, that, like I said, could be a long process for a cable, and several tens of thousands to get that done. And that's just crazy. That's highway robbery. It's stupid. I mean, who needs to know if an amplifier or a cable can drop from 50 feet and survive, right? And that's kind of what these processes are about. I may be exaggerating a little bit. But in terms of the science, right? If you're going from a cable that costs a manufacturer about $2 to $3, and you're going to a cable that really has more copper, better, clearer copper, because copper can have contaminants in it. We have to realize, first of all, that the current down a power wire or signal down an interconnect is traveling on the outside of that, whatever that metallurgy is, right? And so the bigger that is, the more supply you get. And so that can make a big difference. Also, the way the cable is built can make a difference. So depending on what kind of jacket is on the outside, or what alternate material they use for grounding and safety, it could affect it. But the reality is an upgrade. I don't know that you have to spend. You could spend several $1,000s on a power cable very easily. I'm not sure that my ears have ever been able to detect enough difference once you get past a few $100s. But you can take a $100 power cable that's really designed well from Isotech or I don't know, Tributaries or any of these companies that are not high volume companies, but you can take their cable and you can actually add it to the back of an amplifier or a preamplifier and really experience a significant difference. So the cable argument to me has always been one that I think is kind of, I saw a YouTube channel, I think Audioholics or something, where the guy held up a piece of, I want to say it was 18 gauge wire that you would use to wire up your garden lights with, right? And he said, and he held up another wire that was very expensive. I think it was a Shinada. And said that the Home Depot wire was equally as good as the Shinada wire. Impossible. Now, I'm not a fan of Shinada. I don't think it's bad or good, but it's not one of my favorites. But I do recall that they actually said that they were identical and there was no way to prove otherwise. Well, that's just pure nonsense. Just in the amount of copper, that whole power signal would be dramatically better. The engineering or the type of wire or the way they implement the wire, that can make a difference. And so some of the arguments are nonsense, but some of them, I think it gets to a point where there is a degree of diminishing returns in that respect. Can you hear the difference between, a $5,000 power cable and a $200 power cable? Maybe. I'm not so sure I've heard enough difference to think about, a $4,800 difference making that much difference in the performance, but it's possible.
Okay, so can you apply the same way of thinking towards the speaker cables as well and towards the interconnects?
I think so. So when we think about speaker cables, we're thinking about two conductors, right? Okay. So when you think about two conductors, you want to think of that as an antenna, right? It can pull noise in. And so what you would want in a speaker wire is a technology that does its very best to reject that noise so that there's not introduction of new noise. And we're talking about RFI.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a number of ideas. There's in tributaries, or a Claris, I think is it's kind of like Toyota, Lexus kind of a comparison. Same brand or same company, but the Claris brand is the higher end.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I forgot Jay's last name, but he came up with a brilliant idea. So he came up with a group of wires inside that cable that actually are prone to carrying certain frequencies. A flat wide wire inside of the same wire that tends to bring in better bass frequencies. Another design, I trying to remember exactly how he did it, but it enhanced mid-range frequencies because of the way the shape of the wire, the size of the wire, and then other wires that were particularly good in terms of how they helped bring in better high frequency. It took me a while to actually say okay, and get it, but I played with it long enough, and really figured out exactly what that was about. But there's a lot of copper involved in that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it didn't bring in other alloys. It didn't bring in silver or anything else. It just brought in a different delivery mechanism, and it worked. And that's the bottom line: is can you hook it up in the system, and will it make enough difference for you to make and spend that money? Ray Kimber, right? Many years ago, I think it was 1977 when I met Ray at a recording studio that I was building in Hollywood. And he came in with a sample. He was working for some studio, I can't remember what it was. But he brought me his braided wire. And I was kind of going, okay, what's it supposed to do? Well, you know, the different amounts of wire
Mm-hmm.
that are in that braided wire coming to a two-wire termination. Part of that is the amount of copper.
Yeah.
The other part of that is that the braid itself is a way to eliminate RFI or minimize RFI. So the geometry in that can make a big difference in delivering the quality of audio you want to hear. And so it's hard for me to justify, $80,000 worth of speaker wire. But we have done some silly things. We had a guy from Taiwan who was he was in the gold business. And he had us do a sort of a Ray Kimber braided design.
Mm-hmm.
Using gold instead of copper or silver or anything like that. And I told him, I said, gold is going to sound awful. And it sounded like absolute shit. But he spent $180,000 to have those speaker cables made. They looked pretty.
Uh-huh.
And he was a lot about bling. I'm not so sure he was good about the quality of the audio. I think it was more about the bling.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like jewelry, you like jewelry.
So then, is it a myth or it's true that, let's say, aluminum cables, especially for the headphones, they make the sound brighter compared to the copper cables?
I'm not sure I've ever heard an aluminum cable.
Okay.
I mean, I've heard silver.
Oh, silver, sorry. My bad.
So-
yes, exactly.
So I think that silver does change the sound.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever actually paid attention to why. I've
Mhm.
just paid attention to the fact that yes, it does.
Yes. Okay.
So like for example, I have in my headphone system at home,
Yeah.
I have a headphone amplifier that was designed by Alex Cavalli, which is beautiful. And I have a modified version that I modified of the MHA 200 from Macintosh.
Mm-hmm.
and I have the one of the original headphones from Focal, the Utopia, and I have a Sony 1Z, the gold portable that I use for a source.
Yeah.
And when I changed from the Axios copper to the Axios silver, it was a big difference. I mean, it was a whole different presentation. But I've never explored the metallurgy as to why there was a difference. I just noticed that when you go to a hybrid where you might go to a copper, but it might be a clad where it's got a silver clad on it. There's a change to the sound, and if it's solid silver, there's another change to the sound. I couldn't tell you that I think one is better than the other necessarily. I think that has to do with personal preference.
Yeah. It's when with my discussions actually when it was about that the word better, it's very it's not suitable in the field of audio because it's about personal opinion, and so it's different.
Okay. Just like when you asked me about tubes versus solid
Yeah,
state,
exactly.
It's a personal preference. I don't make that judgment on your behalf.
Yeah,
I'm just going to say that you should experience it yourself.
exactly.
Take your time and listen to anything for longer than 15 minutes. If you are under 15 minutes, you're not going to discover if that change is going to cause ear fatigue sooner or allow you to listen longer. And you're probably not going to be studied enough in that wire, that interconnect, whatever it might be, power wire. You're probably not going to be studied enough to, as an audiophile or a potential audiophile, or just a really good listening audio enthusiast, which is more my style.
Yeah.
I think you need to spend time with anything. So that's kind of why our store is situated the way it is, because you can spend all day here if you need to get acquainted with the products and make sure that you're going to be satisfied. The biggest problem with a lot of consumer purchases is that they come into a store and they hear a sparkle. They go, oh my God, there's this sparkle in the high frequency. And they go, I'll take that. Right? And they've listened to it for 5 minutes, and then they get it home. And then they listen to it for 30 minutes. And this really starts to bother me after some time. And what they don't understand was ear fatigue set in, and because of maybe an overabundance of mid-range or an overabundance of high frequency, their ears just got tired of that.
Yeah.
But from an original perspective, like their instant reaction was, oh my God,
Yes.
that's really cool. So all that extra semblance was cool in the very beginning, but then after a while you just go, oh shit, I made a mistake. Right? And so that's why you see some brands very commonly on the market in used, right? Like on AudioGone or any of the online things. Some of those brands are a bad choice for that particular listener. There are people who have high frequency hearing loss, and that's not too uncommon. So they'll go to a brighter, more sibilant speaker that might make my ears very tired very fast, but works for them because they have a hearing loss that happened, right? Whatever caused it.
Yeah. And I feel that the same applies to the headphones. You have here, like, from my perspective, the most impressive collection of headphones in the world. I had personal experience, and I discussed this with Wayne as well, that the Sonorous 10 headphones, like a few years ago, I was crazy about them when I saw the headphones here in the showroom. And at some point I ended up having them, and in a few hours I really wanted to return them because I figured out that they're very uncomfortable. Right. Instead of going around the ear, they're like pressing the ear, and with glasses it's really uncomfortable. So
headphones, you really have to pay attention, and I in making a purchase is I would tend to tell people that other people's opinions, if you are familiar with their style of listening, what that means when they say something, what it means to you, because ears are like a fingerprint, right? Everybody's ear is different. So they may tell you that this particular headphone sounds this way. Now, if you can translate that to what that means to your ear, and how you experience it, then you can use that person's opinion as a reference, right? But generally with headphones, because proximity, fit, different things, different head widths, like your head's more round than mine, mine's more narrow. Certain headphones might be uncomfortable after a short period of time. Some headphones might be too heavy. And you might get neck fatigue or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So headphones are a little bit trickier. And then headphones, again, just like any speaker, if you're going to buy one, it's a really good idea to spend some nice quiet time with that component. Because headphones are something that you probably on average are going to listen to for an hour or two, right? Well, if you buy a headphone that just annoys the hell out of you at 15 minutes and it costs you $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, you wasted your money.
Yeah, exactly. Next, how do you feel about the new technologies in the field of electronics? I'm talking about the GA and G gang transistors, which are capable to switch really very, very fast. And as a result, we may end up having, let's say, class D amplifiers in a very small factor, like size, with no necessity for cooling and big radiator, like head sinks and so on. So what is your perspective about that?
Well, so throughout audio life, right, since they've been reproducing, better quality hi-fi components, which is probably towards the tail end of the 40s, right? I think Macintosh started, for example, in 1949. There have been alternate formats brought in, right? We had Class A, Class AB, right? And then Class D, and all these, Class G, all these different formats. Do I think that the newer formats will eventually take and hold a portion of the market? It's a good question. I think yes. Do I think it will be exclusively? No. I think that we'll always have, well, if you're a tube enthusiastic, most of the time it's going to be Class A, right? If you just like good, juicy analog sound, Class A, B is a great hammer, and not the energy waste that Class A. Class A is a huge waste of energy and high heat, right? But it's a very good sound. And Class A you can have a 50-watt Class A power amplifier, for example, and it can start comparing to a 200-watt solid-state amplifier in terms of not speed necessarily, but in terms of how that 50 watts sounds very much like that 200 watts in terms of ability to get louder.
Yeah.
But do I think that the newer designs are getting better? Yes. Do I think that they're going to find a home in the marketplace? Yes. But I think that every one of the newer technologies, like Class D, for example, when it came out, it was ugly.
Yeah, yes.
It's gotten better, right? And so I think that those technologies will advance into the marketplace over time, and people who are really critical listeners but like to really enjoy the music, I think that at some point, maybe after I'm dead, but at some point, they'll get to the point where they're getting much better. And power consumption's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So everybody's trying to make more efficient product. And I think that's a good idea. You don't need to, why should I spend $30 on electricity to listen to audio? Right? But I think that that's still a ways away, just like I think the digital audio technology is still a ways away from being really very good. There are some, DCS does a good job of digital. A lot of companies do a really good job of digital, but look how long it took to get there.
So talking about digital, it's a great way to introduce the next question. You have preference between the Delta Sigma DAX and the ladder resistor ladder decks. At least my impression is that the ones which use like high precision resistors for the resistor ladder decks, they can work natively with DSD, and perhaps the sound signature is more like a tube amplifier compared to the Sigma Delta. What are your thoughts in this area?
You know, I think it's, I don't know that, I think as long as it has the ability to translate the data correctly,
Yes.
and it sounds good, it's good. So whether it's a Delta Sigma or whether it's a ladder DAC,
Yeah.
if it can get you there, whatever.
Okay.
You know, it's RTR, whatever it might be, right?
Yes.
It's whatever gets you there and makes you feel like you're in the music and the emotions there.
Yeah.
If it pulls away from that and just gives you an over detailed or over sampled sound, it's gonna sound ugly no matter what.
Yeah. And you offer here the full blown, like everything from the room treatment to the let's say the source, the audio, the amplifiers and the loudspeakers. If you were to give an advice to your current clients, customers, and future ones, which is, let's say, the most critical component which they first must focus on, and which is like the base, like where is the room treatment, where is the speakers, or the source.
So I think the first thing that anybody should pay attention to is whatever they're listening to. So if it's a headphone, define that, what makes your ear really happy first. If it's a speaker, same thing. Define that, because that's the part you're intimate with. From there, the beauty of that is you can now make it better through the electronics. You can even make it better through the source or D-to-A conversions or whatever that might be, right? And so the defined attributes, if you start with a good fundamental, the speaker or the headphone, are much easier to achieve. So you can get there better by selecting your most intimate component first. If you try to come at it from the other direction, you could end up having a much more difficult time about finding that ideal system for your personal taste. So room treatments, I mean, I come from the concert world, so I'm used to mayhem, right? You go in and do a 40,000 seat arena, the sound is bouncing all over the place. it's hard work.
Yeah.
But room correction can be a big enhancement.
Yes.
And the first time I dealt with anything that was live sound in a very uncontrolled environment was a long time ago, but we started to realize that the environment made a big difference, right? And so that was an important factor. If you know that your components are solid and you place those components into a room, sometimes you have to move it to a different part of the room. So a hard wall versus a soft wall can make a difference. Sometimes you do have to add diffusion to a system because the room might compress in on you. Bass traps sometimes are necessary. Sometimes a room could be so reflective that you want to get rid of the first order reflection to clean up the image, you know, the staging of the image. And there's a number of things that you might want to do to achieve closer and closer perfection. One of my really fun customers was going nuts in his house. He was buying all this shit online, boom, 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 and he goes, "Jason, I just can't get this to sound good." And I went to his house and I listened to what was going on. And I said, "Okay, let's pull everything out." And he goes, "The gear too?" And I go, "No, leave the gear. It's fine. Leave the gear where it is." And I said, so we took out his bass traps, we took out all his diffusers, we took out his all the crap he had on the side to try and minimize the first order reflection. We left a woolen piece of carpet in front of the speakers, and then I took a 4x8 sheet that he already had. You know, it was a 4x8. I think it was a 4-pound piece of 1-inch thick fiberglass that had been fabriced over, and I held it up on his ceiling for him, and said, "Now listen to your system." And he goes, "Oh my God, it's just all corrected." I go, "Yeah, you were approaching that ugly sound from the wrong place. There was nothing. That's where all your problem was. But you were on, I think it was AVS Forum, getting 4,000 opinions, and some of those opinions might have been valid. I don't know. I don't know who those people were, so I don't want to discount anybody's opinion. But if you don't understand how to find standing waves, if you don't know how to determine where the first order reflection conflicts might be, then you end up with a corrupt, soundstage. So it's learning how to deal with that.
You mentioned room corrections, so which is an amazing introduction to the next question. How do you feel about tone controls and equalizers? Because there are some guys over there in the wild internet who are like pure, we're talking about pure representation of the sound. So anything like a tone control or equalizer, it's complete no.
Well,
for them.
That can be. I can understand where people can get there, but who cares? So if you're a vinyl listener, or like you like tape, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe the recording of that you're listening to is one of your favorite recordings, but it's from way back in your memory, and you remember it had bass, but now you're listening to it and it doesn't. Okay?
Yeah.
So if the tone control is a good quality tone control and doesn't bring distortion into the thing, then who cares? Turn the bass knob up, right?
Exactly.
And so those people that are saying don't do that, you'll corrupt the signal, you're modifying it, but you're modifying it, if you're using MQA, or you're modifying if you're using SACD. There's all these different things that modify it. So where's the purist? It's like, does that purist thing actually make a difference? Maybe, to some people. I'm sure it fits. Do I think that you should go without a tone control if you are the kind of person that likes to fuss because your recordings are all over the map and how they sound? No, I think it's okay to do. Do I think you should, you get somebody with an equalizer, right? And they've got, 7 positions of equalization. If you're going all crazy, well, you're modifying the signal, but it's your choice.
Yes.
Right? It's not somebody else's choice. If it's your system and you're listening to it in your environment, frankly, who cares what somebody else thinks?
Yeah, it's...
as long as you're not bringing in distortion, I don't think there's any problem.
From my perspective, the whole idea of having the purest possible, let's say the most native, I'm not sure how to say it, in order to bring the concert the way it is in the room, nobody actually knows how was the original concert.
They weren't there.
So that's why it's just a myth. We are listening to something.
And it's really not. If you think about it, it's really not the original sound. It's not. So that's an industry I spent a long time in, is live sound, right? So when they're doing the remote truck for the recording and you're doing the mix for the house, that's 2 different guys.
Yeah.
Right? There's 3 different guys involved, really. There's the guy doing the monitor mix, which is what the musicians are listening to, right? There's the guy doing the front of house, which is what I did for years. That's the guy that feeds the audience. And then there's the guy in the truck who's just recording the tracks with as much clarity as he possibly can, so that another guy can come in and do the final production on that recording, and then drop it down to 2-track or multi-track, whatever it is. There's a lot of people involved.
Yes.
What was real?
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's a myth, right? And it's okay to have tone controls. It's okay to make your system sound in the way you like it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. So if you have, let's say, a truck full of gold and you can buy whatever audio equipment, I don't remember, did I already ask you? So can you describe your like the perfect or the like the dreamed one audio setup? Let's say your perfect audio setup. Which components you're going to put include like digital converter, turntable, whatever. So it's just. Would you share your
So,
wildest dreams beyond your imagination?
I've never given that any thought.
So now is the moment.
It's
And
I don't even know how to answer that question. I know that for me, um, I get manufacturers offering me free stuff all the time,
uh-huh.
and some of it's actually very good. But my 2-channel listening, it's 100% audio research, other than the speakers, which are Sonos Faber,
Okay.
and I'm very happy with it. I love it.
Yeah.
It's got a turntable.
Okay.
I've got the new Macintosh MCD 12,000, which is a tube and or solid state CD, so I can also bring in through that DAC, I can bring in other digital mediums. And I'm happy as a pig in mud. I love it.
Okay.
In my theater, it is a combination of things. It's a lot of Macintosh power, mostly because I like to look at the blue meters.
Yes, the blue meters.
And done right, Macintosh can sound really very good in home theater and in 2-channel too. It's there's a bunch of brands out there that can do a very good job. So I'm one of the guys that worked for a company that started in 1968 called SAE. I help engineer and design products. Morris Kessler was the guy who started the company. He came up with an amplifier design that is just drop dead brilliant. It's an amazing amplifier. There's one called the 2HP, and that's 800 watts per channel in one single chassis, but it's 2 monoblocks. You have to plug it into the wall twice.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And it's in one chassis. It's great. The only reason I don't have it in my house is because it's like 150 pounds and it's massive. It's just a big box, but damn, is it good. So another engineer and I designed the line stage, the preamp. And everybody who hears that combination just goes, holy cow. Even employees from other manufacturers have come in and said, holy cow. Not just consumers. It's pretty impressive stuff. And people don't really remember SAE that much because it was a huge product, a brand, back in the late 60s, early 70s. I don't know exactly what the dates were, but Giorgio Moroder, the producer, bought it and just let it sit. He never did anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
Bought the company. And then somebody else, I don't know the history exactly, bought it after Giorgio decided, I'll sell this guy the rights. And then somehow, a number of years back, I think 5 or 6 years ago, the current ownership and Morris Kessler, the original owner, got together and came out with the new SAE. It's great stuff. And if I wasn't such a big tube fan, I probably would have gone SAE, because it's really warm. It's got a fantastic sound to it, but it's also heavy on the pocketbook, so you have to be prepared to spend some money.
Wow. So, let's see. I have a couple of reel-to-reel recorders in the truck outside.
Mm-hmm.
So just hypothetically, I already shared with you that one of my dreams in the field of audio is at some point to design and build a reel-to-reel recorder. So let's say we imagine that this becomes successful. Are you willing in the future at some point to add to your dream audio system a reel-to-reel player?
Me personally?
Yes.
No.
Why?
I think I just, a turntable is enough of of a pain in the butt because you got to put the stylus down, remove the stylus. Uh, the technology is cool, but I think that I think it's mostly the quality of the tape surface. It just wears out so fast, and if you're not on a really good glass type tape head, that constant rubbing is probably worse than a stylus in a piece of vinyl.
So what I hear here is that you're concerned about the ergonomics, that it's painful to operate the tapes, and the second thing is about the quality of the heads. So this means that if we have, let's say, a reel-to-reel player with the best possible heads, which are very gentle towards the tape, and you can sit on your couch once you put the tape, and you can operate the reel-to-reel player using your iPhone or voice commands. Are you ready to reconsider that? Just hypothetically.
So I don't ever say no to anything.
Okay, that's a great approach.
But in today's world, it's not something that I personally would find interesting. But it doesn't mean that somebody else wouldn't enjoy it.
Okay.
So, we used to work with this company MBL, and they are really big. Or the guy who sells it here in the U.S. is really big on doing tape sourced demonstrations, and the recordings were great. I couldn't get enthusiastic as all, but I listened to it and I thought it was good. I really had no problem with it. On the other hand, those reel-to-reels they weren't the typical 7 and 8 inch size reels. They were the 10 inch.
Mm-hmm.
They were also half tracks instead of quarter tracks.
Yeah.
And it just, when the cost gets to $15,000-$20,000 like that, I start to go, okay, I don't need it that bad.
Okay.
So when a really good turntable can cost you $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, it just makes it a little bit more affordable. And if we think about it from price is no object, from being very affluent,
Mm-hmm.
And you don't mind, popping off your reels, and there's nothing wrong with it. Do I root for it to come back in the industry? I don't have an opinion like that. I don't really think of it that way. I just think about if it becomes popular where a lot of people are asking me for it, then the chances are I'll find the guys who are, rehabilitating the old Revoxes and some of the really good tape machines. See who's using some of the old glass type heads that like Akai was famous for.
Yeah. GX, I think GX series, Akai 747.
Yeah. So
I have one of them.
If that happens, then and they're intelligently made, then yeah, I would certainly consider bringing it into the store. But based on what I know today, I'm not there, and I mean, you saw how big the store is, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't even remember you didn't even know that was this side where we're sitting now.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the secret room.
No, this is just where this is where we are able to place more moderate budgets.
Yeah.
The other end where you were at was the higher end stuff.
Yeah. So actually, this is what you're telling me is precious, because what I heard till now was the heads. You actually shared your concerns, which means that from a person with your experience in the industry, your concerns, when they stop to exist, this means possibly a kick-ass product. So I hear the concerns about the heads, I heard the concerns about the flexibility of the usage, and I hear the concerns about...
a little bigger the tape, the better the sound.
Yes, I hear that. And let's say the last concern was about the price point. So you're like, deadline, or it's not the proper English word, come on, you're like, tipping point was like $5,000, $5,000, if I heard correctly, like $4,000, $5,000. So right?
Well,
Yeah, the modern.
I think that the expenditure shouldn't. The tapes themselves are already extraordinarily expensive.
You're talking about the pre-recorded ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the moment they're in the price range of, let's say, €500, $500, and this is what is at the moment. So it's the chicken and egg thing. So I'm talking right now about the hardware. So the hardware, if a miracle happens and some clever guy or team of people succeed to bring it, let's say, below your cutting budget of, let's say, $5,000, then perhaps you may consider it. So from my perspective, this is amazing feedback which I got from you.
So
Yeah.
So there are guys that I'm familiar with that I consult with a lot, but they ask me a lot of questions and engineering questions, and there is one guy that I hope I'm saying the city name correctly. He's from Kharkiv. So how do you say it?
Kharkov?
Kharkiv,
Kharkov? Oh, it's
Ukraine.
yeah, Kharkov.
Okay.
Perhaps.
I'm not.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, yeah, it's
So,
a city somewhere.
It's a yeah.
There's a smart guy.
He's a really smart engineer. He's asked me a lot of things. We share conversations. So he is trying to do a rehabilitation of older machines, and he's trying to buy these machines for a few $100s,
Yes.
and then completely rehab them so that they become a competitor in the mid $5,000 to $10,000 range,
Yes.
which is pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
And I admire what he's doing. I think he's doing a great job, and I like how he's introduced me to the Ukraine background and so on and so forth. But so I get to share that culture with him. But the man, I think, is a pure genius, and I think that things like the Eastern European approach to that kind of product is not a bad idea. I think the enthusiasm they have, the more enthusiasm, the more likelihood for good quality success.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. It's the limited marketplace for the machines, and the higher cost of the medium. From a sales standpoint, it's a little bit tougher to deal with. From a music lover, does it work? Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I have personally a Pioneer half track at home that just sits in a box.
RT707 or 909?
909.
Oh, it's a beautiful machine. I love it.
And it works.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I got it from I sold it into a job for a guy that was a television show hairstylist. His name was Vidal Sassoon. I think he makes. I don't even know if he's still alive, but he does hair products, right?
Yeah.
And then when they closed that part of his company down, I bought it for like $400.
Lucky you. It's because right now they're like $2,000 and above.
Yeah, and so do I wish that it had a really nice Akai tape head on it? Yeah, that would really kind of kick it up a notch, right?
Yeah.
And it's a 10-inch, right? You can go up to 10-inch reel on that. So it's a good idea. Do I pull it out and put it in my system? No.
Okay. And actually, you can get a real remote, a modern remote, and control the units.
It's wired. It's a wired remote.
No, it's not. I'm talking about there's some modern stuff now.
Oh.
There's smart guys over there who figured it out. So you simply, let's say you buy it from eBay, for example, and it has with the special connector. You connect it. You put on top of it the infrared receiver, and after that you have like a standard remote,
right?
And you can operate it, especially when it's auto reverse.
Right.
It really works great. I have one for Technics, and I have one for my Akai 747,
right,
and for the Pioneer as well. And now let's switch to speakers. Electrodynamic. Okay, I'm just going to use brands, and I respect all of them. So let's say if we compare Sonos Fiber Magnepan, Martin Logan. I'm just talking about brands because they're using different speaker technologies. Let's say electrodynamic of magnets. Uh, Martin Logan, I believe that the oh my
Talking
god.
about the electrostatic panels?
Yes, the electrostatic and magnepan, the magnetic something. Yeah. So do you have preference between? We're talking here pure technology. I'm not talking about the produce like the guys who make the speakers. I'm talking about the technology behind the speakers.
You know, again, you're not asking. Are you asking my personal
Yes,
opinion
your
for my listening?
Yes,
Church?
your personal experience, which is your dream speaker.
So I like traditional dynamic speakers.
Traditional dynamic
You know,
speakers.
only because, having spent 30 years of my life in the concert business, I'm used to that kick drum hitting me right in the chest.
Yeah.
And so that presentation is where I find my joy. Do I like the transparency of electrostatics, that air that exists? If it's a good one, I would like it. Magnepan, do I like it? Again, if it's a good model or any of them that use any of this technology, do I like it? Yeah, I mean, air is good, right? But I like things that are more dynamic, and so I go for traditional speakers.
So if we combine, let's say, the best of all worlds, let's say to have magnepans and let's say a nice subwoofer, is going to work better from your perspective, or it's challenging to match it in a good way.
Yeah, it becomes personal preference, and my personal preference is not that kind of speaker.
Okay, I got it. So, what is the question which you really wanted me to ask you, and I didn't ask you?
You've asked me a lot of questions.
No, it's
and you made me late for my appointment.
I apologize about that.
That's okay. I think you've asked a lot of good questions. I don't know that I have any suggestions for another question.
So then, can you spend a few moments to tell all of the current and future subscribers of the channel where are you located? What are the working hours?
Sure.
So people can really come here, because from my perspective, what you did, it's something amazing, because music for me, it's a very important part of my life. And what you did, it gives opportunity to people to come and to spend as much time as it's necessary for them, so they can choose something which is going to make a difference in their lives. So
okay, so I'll start with the location and hours. So we're in the Los Angeles area, about 20 minutes from the Los Angeles International Airport, in a city called Torrance. We picked this city because my brother and I grew up at the beach, right, and in Redondo Beach. And it's close by. So, for us, it's a 15, 20-minute drive, depending on traffic, to get here. And so this is where it started, this is where it stayed. And our hours are we're still kind of running semi-COVID hours. And we haven't expanded back out yet, but we're looking at that. It's to give everybody time so that they're not overworked. We're closed on Sunday and Monday, so from Tuesday through Friday, from 11 a.m. Pacific time to 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's those hours. And then Saturday we're open again from 12 to 6. So we're not an 8-hour a day or a 10-hour a day or 12-hour a day store. We're a 6-hour a day store. But we're able to, in that time period, service a lot of customers' questions and do a lot of demonstrations. And it typically gives most of the population in the general area a good opportunity to listen to anything they want.
Yeah.
Unless we do an event, we're not a crowded store, so there's not a lot of conflict between this guy being too loud and this guy over here trying to hear what he can because this guy's too loud or whatever. So we run the company like we run our lives. We try to make it comfortable for everybody, and
Yeah.
so, and we try to make it about information. So, I have on occasion while I'm here on the phone talk to people for 15, 20, 30 minutes to help answer their questions, to even decide if they want to come here and listen. So it is what it is. It's Tuesday through Friday, 11 to 5, and Saturday 12 to 6, and that's our hours right now.
No appointment required.
No appointment required.
Okay, yeah.
But the portion of the company that does installation
Yes.
is open from 9 to 5.
Okay, 9 to 5. Wow, and for me, it was really life changing when I found you and I started to come here and listen to the headphones and stuff like that. Let's say experiencing Hans Zimmer Gladiator with high quality, let's say Woo Audio WA33 and LCD4. Audi Z LCD4, for me, it's like I'll always remember that experience.
We're doing a VIP event with Woo Audio in August. I forgot what day. I think it's August 5th.
Yeah, at the moment, this is my dream, future dream, tube headphone amplifier. And one last question, perhaps, if you were to choose between sitting and listening to your dream audio system and driving your crazy powerful car, 1,000 horses or how much?
No, that one that's outside right now is 850.
It's only 850 or 850. So between 850 watts and 850 horsepower, which one do you prefer?
So I love them both.
Okay.
On the other hand, I'm actually a real hardcore car guy. I love driving on racetracks. I don't on the streets. I'm a little bit above the speed limit, but in real life, when I drive crazy fast, I'm on a racetrack. I'm on like Willow Springs, or sometimes I go to Laguna Seca, and I think that's called the Mazda track now. Or I'm out in Vegas, and I'm fortunate because Carroll Shelby Racing School is where I started. So
Wow.
So that's probably why I love Shelbys and collect Shelbys. But I have a Cobra, an old Cobra from 1965.
Yeah, it's every time when I come here, I see I see this vehicle and I take pictures and it's like.
No, that's a new car.
Yeah, that's a new car.
So the 65 Shelby Cobra that I have that's so visceral.
Oh, so I didn't see it. Okay.
I never bring it to work.
Ah.
It's worth $1.5 million. So it's not a car I drive on the street too often.
Okay, got it. At least can you share a picture in the future?
I think I might have one on my phone.
Okay, great. So then, what is the power? Okay, what's the audio equipment inside your beast?
So Ford, makes the Shelby GT500, and the front end radio is made by a Chinese company called Visteon, and the speakers that they put in the door are made by Kicker.
Kicker?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I left it that way because I care about the sound of the motor.
Okay, I got it. So you don't want to spoil the sound. You don't want to spoil the horses with the watts.
Right. So I have a Shelby Super Snake, a GT500 Super Snake, that is a convertible. Now, that is a 2008, and that Shelby program started in 2007. And I think they still do Super Snakes. It's just not as big a motor. And that car has 825 or 827, something like that, horsepower. But in that car, I was contracted to design a Macintosh system.
Mm-hmm.
So that car has a real Macintosh system in it.
So talking about car systems, let's say, I might confess that I'm a Dodge guy. It's my current truck. It's Dodge Durango RT, 5.7 liter, the Hemi engine.
Mm-hmm.
So why you chose let's say, Ford compared to Chrysler or Dodge?
So, well, I think the Hellcat and the Demon are actually pretty badass motors,
Okay, yeah.
and so there's nothing wrong with that. I think when Daimler bought the Chrysler company, they improved the product. I think before that it
Yeah.
wasn't particularly good, but back when I was in high school, I had a Plymouth GTX, right? And Plymouth was part of that group, right? It was called Dodge Chrysler Plymouth.
Yeah.
And raked up in the back, front end lowered. Had a Hemi in it, a 440 Hemi. I think 440. I think it was a 440, a long time ago. Thing was just stupid fast, and it was a carbureted car, so you could smell the unburned fuel. It was just nasty, visceral. So I've had Dodges before. I also have had Corvettes and a number of cars. I've had in my lifetime. I had an AMG, an SL65, a 12-cylinder. Top went down.
Wow.
And I loved it. So I think mostly now it's I just tend to I design stuff with Ford.
Okay. Yeah. Makes
So
sense.
I get good accommodations on the price.
Yes.
They treat me very well. They don't seem to break for me. They stay running perfectly.
Okay.
And so on the newer stuff, on the older stuff, that's where Shelby got it from the factory, right? From Ford factory. And then they modified it at the Shelby factory, right? And part of that is, it's kind of like the connection between Carroll. Carroll and Shelby and I were sort of friends. And he was a guy that told me when I was a youngster, he was a Macintosh fan, by the way. And in his house, I installed his Macintosh audio system for him. And I wasn't even in the audio business, not that into the audio business. Professional side, yes, but not consumer. And what he told me once that cracked me up, it just made me laugh really hard. It hurt my stomach. I laughed so hard. And he looked at me and he said, "Jason, you know what a stereo really is?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "A big V8 and 2 tailpipes." and I've been fascinated by Shelby product, and he was, like I said, a close friend. He and his team taught me how to drive race cars.
So you knew personally the Shelby guy?
Carroll Shelby, yeah.
Yeah. Do I hear correctly? So the whole movie about Shelby with Matt Damon, and was it historically correct?
It was a movie.
It's a movie. Okay, I got it.
So a lot of it is kind of correct. Shelby was a hard ass to some people. He was really very nice to me.
And switching from horses to watts, do I remember correctly that you were the sound engineer of Eric Clapton, if I remember?
For 25 years.
For 25 years. Okay. So,
I worked with a lot of artists. I mean, I've worked with Toto, I worked with Bryan Adams, Manhattan Transfer, just a bunch. It's the sequence of events happen because it's a calendar, right?
Yeah.
It's what sound company they're using, where they are, how long the tour is. But yeah, I spent a lot of time in that industry.
Oh my God, it's really, I feel honored knowing you and having this opportunity for the interview. So horses and watts, and maybe perhaps this is maybe the last question. Where comes the snake on the vehicle? What's the story behind the snake?
Well,
The copyright.
So the story goes a lot of ways, but the way Carroll told the story was, I think it's in the movie, was he just had a dream one night where he decided that he wanted to call his first 2-seater sports car a Cobra.
Oh.
And that's where that snake comes from.
Yes.
And then I guess that they've come up with iterations of that. Like they put the snake on the GT350, they put the snake on the GT500, they put the snake on, of course, the Super Snake program. I mean, it's just, that's part of what Shelby used when they logoed it. When Ford took over building the GT 500 Mustangs, and I don't think they might have done a 350 later on. I think it was 1968 or 9 where Ford took over building the Shelby Mustangs, and so that was a relationship there already, right?
Mhm.
And then Shelby's, I think there was a conflict, if I remember right, between Ford and Shelby, and then Ford started building the cars, and of course Ford's going to think they did it better, and actually they do a pretty damn good job. The Shelby is an aftermarket company now, so if you buy a Shelby GT 500, like that one that's outside, you can send it to Shelby, and they'll turn it into a Shelby GT 500 KR.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they have a Super Snake program for that GT 500, but I know that they have they had an SE special edition or signature edition. I can't. And then they had the KR. I chose not to have the car modified because Ford gave me a 10-year warranty on the car instead of a typical 3-year.
Cool.
And so if I modify the car,
Yeah.
I could limit that warranty
Yeah.
real fast. And frankly, it's got enough power where it eats a lot of cars alive. I got in a race with a guy that was driving a Hellcat, and when I pulled off the freeway, he got off right behind me, and he goes, "That car is fast," and he couldn't believe that I was out in front of him the whole time.
Oh my god. So if you were to choose between turbocharged V6 like Lincoln Navigator, Lincoln Aviator, and Hemi engine, which one?
You mean a small motor with a Hemi?
No, it's me. I'm okay. In general, personally, I'm not familiar with the engines of, like, let's say your Beast. What's inside?
Oh, it's a 5.2 liter 4-valve modular motor.
No turbo, nothing like.
No, supercharged.
It's supercharged. So my point is that, let's say the regular, let's say Lincoln Navigator, the high-end Ford Lincoln Navigator, Lincoln Aviator, they started to use V6, which is turbocharged. So I'm asking about turbocharged
that's
compared
that's
to
the EcoBoost system.
yeah, the EcoBoost engine.
So even the late model Ford GT uses an EcoBoost 6-cylinder EcoBoost system, and it can be tuned out to where it's really very fast. I think the sound for me of an 8-cylinder is really very exciting. But I'm also an Aston Martin fan, so the sound of a 12-cylinder, motor is also, is also very appealing to me. And how can you hate the sound of a Ferrari?
Oh my God! Yeah.
So the high pitched whine of a 12-cylinder, or the more moderate pitch of an 8-cylinder.
I saw yesterday in Munich, it was a Lambo on the freeway. I took a video. It's cool. So yeah, I adore the sound of the V8 as well, especially the of the exhaust.
And you can't hear the supercharger on this thing.
Yeah.
So my Super Snake, you can hear it. It gets this high pitched whine, and it's got all kinds of grunt. This thing just has amazing torque, amazing horsepower. And the first day that I picked it up, it actually startled me. I got up on the 405 freeway coming from the San Fernando Valley, and a friend of mine went with me to pick it up, and he's about, I think he's probably close to 300 pounds. I'm 170 pounds. So nearly 500 pounds of passenger. And we were going uphill, right? And he goes, "What happens if you punch it?" So I punched it, and that car got up and over the Sepulveda Pass like now. It was and the butt end was just, you could feel it grabbing all the way through to fifth gear. Now it's a 7-speed automatic, right? It's paddle shifters.
Yes.
I didn't use the paddle shifters.
Yeah.
I just had it. I started off in a lower grunt gear, so it had tons of launch. But it was just, I was going, okay, I'm going to like this car for a long time. It's a really cool car.
Oh, even with mine, which is 360 it's like going up. It's piece of cakes of 850. I can guess that. No, I cannot guess. It's something beyond my imagination. And the last question about cars. I believe that I overheard recently that you like electric. So, what's your perspective about that? Because in general, we cannot compare the torque of the electrical motor and
Well, electric is
internal IC one.
yeah, the electric is really instant torque,
Yes, instant.
and that's great. So that makes them very cool on launch. I mean, so when Tesla first came out with the Model S, a friend of mine asked me to drive it, and so I was on the on ramp to a freeway, and I punched it. He asked me to do that, and it got to the top of the on ramp damn fast. An amazing surprise to me. I didn't think it could do that. But I think the electric car market is very cool. The challenge is finding a company that does it where the cars are built nice. So, Elon Musk is probably going to hate me, but I think his stuff is built like shit. But I don't think there's any good quality. The build quality of the car is very bad. The paint quality is very bad. The fit and finish, the way the doors, the seams and everything, it's just awful. So do I have a lot of respect for it from that perspective? I wouldn't put that kind of money into it. So I wouldn't spend my money on that.
Yeah, it is even for me having ventilated seats is extremely important in California. And come on, like $100,000 vehicle.
So, but recently I drove the Lucid.
Yeah.
And the fit and finish on every car I saw, and every car I drove, was just exquisite. It was like buying. They're not cheap. They're between 80 and 130. I think is the most expensive one. But the fit and finish was really done nicely. The performance was really very nice. The battery life is superior. But that guy is also the guy that helped make Tesla who it is.
Mm-hmm.
But he used all the ideas that Elon Musk said no to. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And they were all great ideas, but they've got a supercharger mechanism coming out, which means that you can get faster charges. They've also got a car that has a range of, I think, 580 miles on a charge. So that means you could drive from here in Los Angeles to Vegas and drive around town while you're there before you had to charge the car again.
Yeah, that's comfortable.
Yeah. I do that in the Shelby. I have to stop for gas twice.
So, talking again about speakers, there are some rumors I heard here and there that you sold very expensive speakers to a very important guy. Is this true?
Well, you're talking about Elon.
Sorry?
You're talking about Elon? Elon Musk?
Yeah.
So yeah, we sold.
Because you mentioned his name, that's why it was a great introduction.
So
to
we
that
sold
question.
him the Sonus Faber, the first generation Sonus Faber AIDA. And when we did it, we discovered that he was using it for a gaming system.
Oh my God.
And when we put him in his house, he had a bed sheet hanging from the ceiling and a conference type cheesy projector firing on it. And he was using a Denon audio video receiver. It was horrific. It was awful. But he bought the AIDAs, which is at the time, I think there might have been the Sonus Faber out at that time, which was a little more money, probably I think at the time around $175,000 a pair.
175.
I think the AIDAs were $120,000 a pair.
Okay.
And he ended up with 5 of the AIDAs.
5 of them?
For his surround sound.
Oh, surround, okay.
But he also went out and bought this really crappy amplifier. I won't name the manufacturer.
Okay.
And he bought that from another company. And we said, do not buy that amplifier. And his girl assistant thought I was trying to convince him to buy a more expensive amplifier. When I was trying to get her to understand that amplifier that they asked me about was going to throw so much distortion in it that within a few days, he was going to probably burn out his tweeters and mid-range, and it did happen. He had to have all his tweeters and mid-ranges replaced because he was using this amplifier that...
This amplifier, okay.
So I can tell you that Dan D'Agostino is the guy who owned that company that made that amplifier. But Dan D'Agostino makes really good products now and in the beginning of the other company.
So, what is your perspective? How do you see the high-end audio market introducing more and more like Macintosh audio systems? Because, for example, I know that one of the Jeeps, let's say the Grand Wagoneer, the Grand Cherokee, the newest one, they have Macintosh audio system inside, and they offer Tidal as part of the whole kit and caboodle and everything. So, do you feel that more and more manufacturers will start to introduce high-end audio?
I think it already happens. I mean, so Bose doesn't build the Bose stereo system that you buy when you get a Corvette. That's a licensing thing. They pay for the use of the name.
Wow.
Samsung now owns Harman International, right? And so Revel and JBL and all those brand names that are under that Harman International group are oftentimes licensed names, and the only requirement is that they pay the audio manufacturer a license fee to use that name, and in a lot of cases, the audio manufacturer gets to review that system at the end, and in many cases they don't, right? So they may go, you just pay us for the use of the name and you can do that. In other cases, like with Sonus Faber and the Maserati, there's actually a relationship where they designed it and it was meant to sound good. There's crossbreeding because the guys who were working for Sonus Faber are also the same guys that worked a little bit with the then Fiat Chrysler company to do the Macintosh project. But I'm hoping that, there's Burmester, right, and the Porsches and Mercedes. Now that's a little better quality system. But I think that it would be nice to see. I wouldn't want to buy an Apple system in a Tesla, but it sounds okay. In my Shelbys, I don't care what it sounds like because I want to listen to the.
You want to listen to the engine, so.
But it's. I think that you already see B&O. B&O has been introduced in Aston Martin and a number of other cars. Now Ford. Whatever happened there, I don't think was very impressive, but it's co-branding, and they're all trying to increase their market share. So it is what it is. But I would like to see the relationships get stronger. So it'd be nice to see Macintosh, really getting in and designing a nice system for a nice car. And there's a lot of companies that may start doing that. I've heard rumors about Lamborghini aligning with somebody that I can't mention, and I've heard other Italian manufacturers aligning with, say, D'Agostino. They kind of part of its marketing, and some of them, the Sonus Faber relationship with Maserati made good sense because it was all about sound quality, and they presented it that way. So my hope is that if they do it, it's not just license out the name. It's actually make something that sounds good too.
Product. And if you were to recommend or choose for yourself between Tidal, Cobus, and Apple Lossless, Apple Music, which one?
I don't know.
All of them. Okay, good. And the last question: why exactly this brilliant? It's navy blue, light blue, or how do you call the color of your car?
Let's see. My Super Snake is called Vista Blue. They have it. Oh, this is called Velocity Blue.
Velocity. So why not red or something else?
Well, one, blue is my favorite color,
Okay.
and two, red is much more obvious when I'm driving at 100 miles an hour when the speed limit is 65. So red is, that's like the cop sees you a lot easier.
Okay, makes
So-
sense.
It's kind of like, it's if you're buying an Aston Martin and you're driving really fast, like really fast, you probably want silver. One, because that's a James Bond color, right?
Yes.
And two, because the cop's not likely to see you as easily. But obvious colors like, that blue's pretty bright, and I would imagine that I could get caught pretty easy at some of the speeds I do sometimes. But most of the time, I just drive a little bit over the speed limit.
Yeah.
Not too much.
And what about the white color? Should I be worried with my beast, the Dodge Durango RT?
So I don't think. I would suggest that everybody be safe behind the wheel and
Yes,
don't do stupid things. But I don't think that white's an obvious color. I think that red's an obvious color, and bright orange.
Yeah.
Camaro does bright orange. Even I saw a bright purple Mustang. I don't know if it was a Shelby Mustang or just a regular Mustang. And it was bright, and I'm going, I wouldn't want to drive that.
Yeah.
If I'm a Ricky racer and I'm going fast, I don't want to be on the street with that bright of a car. I think the red is just an obvious, everybody sees red from any distance.
Yes.
That's why they use it for taillights when you're hitting the brakes.
Yes. And for me personally, it's about the torque of the engine and the whole experience of the power power. It's because most of the time people will say, why the heck you need so powerful vehicle to they connect the power with the speed. And
There's two reasons. One, because it's fun.
Yes.
Right. And the other is probably compensation of a small penis. I'm not telling you what mine is.
Okay, that was a wonderful way to go towards the end of the interview. So thank you so much for your time, for your precious time. I know that you really very badly want to drive your car.
No, I have a meeting that I'm late for.
Okay, so this was amazing experience for me. Thank you so much for building this amazing showroom and bringing all of these products to everyone. So I'll do my best to spread the message on internet, on Facebook, on YouTube.
Right.
So once again, thank you.
Well, thanks. I hope it's a good video for you.
It is. Thank you. It's all the questions and the feedback about the real to real. This is it's unique. It's precious. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Okay. Good news.
Yeah.